Welcome to the Divorce Podcast, where we explore all aspects of ending relationships, separation, and parenting apart. If your marriage or partnership has ended, or you have friends and family who are separating, this podcast is for you. I'm Kate Daly, a relationship counsellor, divorce specialist, and co-founder of Amicable, the online legal service for separating couples. In each episode, we look at relationships and separation from different angles, including the emotional, legal, and social. I'm joined by experts and special guests who share their own unique stories, experience, and tips with the goal of helping people end relationships in a kinder and better way. In this episode, I was joined by mentor, coach, speaker, and author Ali Mortimer to discuss finding joy both inside and outside of relationships. We begin the episode looking at Ali's separation story, where she talks about how her relationship was taken to the brink following her husband's infidelity. They were able to repair their relationship following Ali's journey of self-discovery and their joint relationship work. Ali says she believes joy is created on the foundations of holistic health and peace of mind, something we explore more deeply in the context of navigating rocky patches in relationships. Ali stressed the importance of the self-work in repairing a relationship and talked about the idea that you have to be a healthy component part before trying to fit together with another person. I was fascinated by the idea that although Ali is still married to her husband and without having divorced, they both identify with this being their second marriage, having grieved the loss of their first. This is a fantastic episode for listeners in any stage of relationship, whether you're looking for tools to maintain a healthy, happy one, or whether you want to understand if your relationship is past the point of repair. If you loved this episode, then please subscribe and rate us on your preferred listening platform. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to be here and to share my story on such a beautiful platform, which I know must serve and help so many going through. I talk about darkness, or you shared my darkness. And I think, this whole podcast is about helping people when they're going through a really difficult, turbulent time that can often feel like darkness. So I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. I know because we've talked before that it has not been an easy path, and you mentioned your story, and I'm very interested to give you the opportunity to help people by sort of talking a bit more about your own personal journey and your story. So let's start there, Ali. Tell us, how you've come to be where you are now. Tell us your story.
I love that question. Tell me your story. And I really do feel like I have lived a true love story that just isn't one that is, a Disney love story. It's a real life love story that's had all of the twists and the turns and the pivots and the plot twists that have made it that true love story, because every time it comes back to love. And I think that love is the most healing, most powerful healing energy that we can give to ourselves and also to others. When we allow love back in, it can be really, really beautiful. And I know through some of the heartbreak that I've been through, it can be really hard to let love back in, especially when your heart's been broken, or when your heart's been shattered by grief or loss or disappointment or betrayal or any of those things. It can be so hard because it hurts so much that you want to lock your heart away in a cage. But actually, one of the most important things and the most healing I've ever felt is by allowing that back in, and it heals so much quicker, and you can get back up when you allow love back in.
What happened in your personal journey then? Because this is the divorce podcast. So you have experience of separation, and what happened when you separated from your partner?
I know that one of the reasons why we were keen for me to come in and share my story on the podcast was for one of the very reasons when I was in that dark place through separation, that I went to the divorce lawyers and I sat down, and I really honestly did think that I would be separating from my husband and moving on and creating a new life for my young family at the time as an independent woman. And I literally took all of the steps to leave, so I got so many differing opinions. But when I really asked myself in my heart, is this what I wanted to do? I never really knew what the answer was. So I started looking for inspiration and for hope to find out if there was a possibility that you could heal after betrayal, after infidelity. And through that journey of exploration, I found that it was a shocking statistic, which said that 75% of all committed relationships would often go through, no, sorry, not often, would go through a level of infidelity. And that ranged from just having a conversation that you kept from your partner because you knew it wasn't quite right, up to kind of like full blown bigamy and all of that, and everything that ranged in between. And I was like, goodness gracious, that's 1 in 3. 1 in 3, that's an incredibly high statistic. And I thought, of all of those, I wonder how many separate and how many stay together. And while I'm currently looking at the option of separating and moving on and starting a new life, it doesn't feel right. So what if I just start to look at it through a different lens and see, are there people out there who have managed to heal and forgive and stay together after having gone through a separation, after having gone through, a betrayal, that having gone through heartache? And I started to look and I started to find not many, but a few stories where that was possible. And that was really where I focused. So it became very important for me to come in and share my stories. So if there are other people out there, men or women, who are looking to find that hope and that inspiration to say, do you know what, going down this route of separation and divorce doesn't quite feel quite right. Are there people who have made it work, and what's their story, and how did they do it, and how far did they go, and when did they know? And I think that was really, really powerful. And that's why I really wanted to come in and share what actually happened.
So I think in your story, you had separated from your husband. He had moved out, had he?
Yes, that's right.
So you were living completely separate lives. You'd moved everything on. Tell us, how far down that divorce journey did you get then? It sounds like quite a long way.
So I'd spoken to about 2 or 3 different divorce lawyers to try and understand, because I had no idea. This wasn't on my future cards. Separating, my husband and I have been together since we were 19. We've been together, nearly 20 years. We were in our 40s. We had 2 small children. I say he was small. They were 6 and 8 at the time. We had a full life. We've been together. We laid on beaches in Fiji as we traveled the world in our 20s and had our whole future mapped out ahead of us, and it suddenly just all came crashing down one Monday afternoon when I just got a load of text messages that just made me realize that I had been wrong, and I had been totally wrong. So I went to the divorce lawyers to try and understand, what was I entitled to? What could I get? What would happen? And I was very surprised that it would, just split equally, and I would get child maintenance. And I just looked at the future of something that I just really couldn't quite comprehend. But I also knew that I wasn't quite sure what my future would look like if I stayed. Could I stay? I didn't know. So I just took massive pressure off myself to have to decide, but started to just gather evidence of what it would look like. And then we needed to sell the family home in order for us to obviously leverage 2 homes at that point. So we were looking at selling the home, and that was moving on. And I'd started to look for properties for my young sons and I to live in. And I'd found a place that was near the boys' school that wasn't too far away. And I was literally about to sign on the dotted line. And my husband rang me and he said, listen, I know we're going down this route of separation, but I found a property that I feel that we should invest our money in, that I would love for you to come in and live with me. But I also appreciate that that's not what you're feeling at the moment. So in which case I will invest and do it up, and we'll sell it, and we'll use the proceeds for the boys' future. And he said, will you come and have a look and see? Because obviously it's partly your money. And I came to look at this property, which was very run down, but there was this huge sense of potential and this huge sense of possibility. And one of the first things that James had said to me when everything had come to light, because I feel like while it broke me, while it broke my heart, it also broke him just as much and broke his heart just as much. And he said to me, the first words, he said, I know that you will never believe a word I say again. I totally understand that you will never believe me. And it's going to be very hard for you to trust me again. But I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. And I will do anything to make you happy again. And he just stepped away and gave me the space to try and understand what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And one of the hardest things that I found was listening to my own inner voice again, rather than listening to the judgment, the advice, the opinions of everybody around me, whether that was very immediate family and friends, whether that was society or anything. I found it very, very hard to block everybody else out and just really go back into myself. And one of the things I found in those times was meditation and mindfulness. I'd started to use the practice when my mum had died 6 months before, to help me with my grief, to help me with my loss, to help me find my way forward, to help me with the pain and heartache of losing my mum. And it was during those periods of time in meditation that I started to just allow myself to feel a sense of happiness. And I would have this vision of myself in a beautiful green garden, very much at peace. And as you spoke my words at the beginning, foundations of peace is something really important to me. But also, I also saw myself in some of the meditations where I was very happy and I was dancing and the boys were happy and we're in this beautiful garden. So when I was looking around the house that James had brought me to come and see, I'd look around the house on the inside and I could see the potential. It was a beautiful old house, great footage, so much potential. And I could understand the desire. But it was when the gentleman who was selling it to us said, "Would you like to come and see the garden?" And I said, "Okay, yes, that would be lovely. I'd love to see the garden." And he took me through like an arch of yew and down some odd steps. And there was just this expanse of lawn surrounded by enormous horse chestnut trees. And it was the garden that I'd seen in every single meditation where I'd been happy. And that was the moment that I knew that this was where I was meant to be. And that was my future. So it was that point that I rang the estate agents and said, "I've decided not to take the rental house. I'm going to go and give my husband another try, a second chance." And it was through the renovations and I often call it was heart, lung and gut surgery in the house as we ripped out the heating and the plumbing and the electrics and the walls. We almost did exactly the same on our marriage as well.
And that feels like a real metaphor, the house being in a really rundown and dilapidated state for the marriage. And it sounds like just that whole experience of coming to and facing the fact that the marriage was in a bad place allowed you to perhaps move on and move past what was happening in the current to a brighter future. Is that how it felt at the time?
It so felt like that. And it was only kind of a little bit later down the line that I really recognized the parallels in what was going on with what we were doing with the house and the property and creating this new home within these four walls and making it a beautiful place. And I go back to, the power of love. It was like we put so much love into the renovation of this house with every conversation of, what color do we want to paint on the walls? What do we love? How do we want this house to feel? We want it to feel welcoming and loving. And in the same time, we were having the same conversations in our marriage, and we obviously had a lot of support. We both had counselling individually and therapy individually to help us with our own issues, but also together. And the marriage counsellor, I remember very, very clearly in one of the sessions, she just said to us, "Your first marriage is over, but do you want to start another one together?" And I thought that was just so powerful. That enabled me to grieve the loss of our first marriage, we started dating when we were 19, 20, and we were in our 40s. So we've been together for 20 years. And the relationship that we'd started in our teens was very different to the one that we've started in our 40s. And I think I look at it now and I think we're 8 years on now, by the way, for our listeners, so that they know the passing of time. And I look back now and I think, wow, how lucky are we that we have had this opportunity to recreate something even more special. And I feel that I've been so lucky to fall in love with the same man twice and to do that. And like with the home, we were ripping out what no longer served us. So not only did we move home, but we also changed our jobs and our careers. We left the communities that we were in and we allowed ourselves to just almost like do this complete cleanse of, if we were starting over, if we were starting again, how do we want to do this? And it was incredibly refreshing to allow ourselves to do that. But we brought everything very, very in I think I touched on it earlier. It was just like I had to go in to not listen to the judgment and the opinions and the guidance of everybody else, but purely trust myself, trust my intuition, trust my heart, trust what I really knew deep down, and allow myself to make my own decisions. And we did that as well as a couple. It was like, if this is what we're going to do, we've also got to, tune out all of the opinions. And we did have a lot of opinionated people who didn't think it was the right thing. How can you possibly do that? It was just like, well, this is my life.
I can understand that, because we have a campaign running at the moment for Amicable called Friends and Family, where we're trying to reach the friends and family of people to ask them not to pass judgment. And people do it out of sometimes a sense of love and wanting to protect you, but only the two of you can know what's in your hearts and what's in that relationship together. And therefore, it really is the business of nobody else to pass judgment on what you should do. And it's natural, isn't it? As human beings, we want to help and guide people. But I think what you're describing is this wonderful opportunity to rediscover, reconnect, and put things back together in a way that, like you say, serves you now. It's like you've got all of these building blocks, you've knocked them down, and now you're going to reconfigure them so that they work for you. So you've experienced the ending, the sorrow, the trauma, by the sounds of it, of infidelity within a relationship, and the destruction of ending a relationship. But then, unlike lots of people and lots of us, you've then said, okay, well, let's see what we can do with those blocks, and in the ruins of that relationship, let's see how we can reconstruct it. And that's a pretty unique experience, I would say. I think a lot of people, once the parts have fallen, tend to sweep them away and move on. But you didn't. And I just wonder, what gave you the courage to reconfigure those parts, as you say, against the advice and against that background noise of societal judgment, and this is what you should do, and you've found out your ex has been unfaithful?
As I said, that phrase that our marriage counsellor said to us, your first marriage is over, do you want to start a second with the same man? That made me see it in a very, very different way. I think something else that I recognized at the time, I'd been doing a lot of work on myself and my personal development. And it was very much this feeling of, I don't have to be a victim to my circumstances. And when I allowed myself not to be a victim of what had happened to me, and recognize that I held all of the keys and all of the power to respond in a way that felt good to me, which I keep going back to this word love. It was very much, I'm returning to love. I was reading Marianne Williamson at the time. It's like, how can I bring more love into this, regardless of what happened? And when we went to our marriage counselor, it was always very much, it was for the love of our boys. It was never about getting back together for our boys and our children. But it was about, how can you help us be in the same room without animosity? How can you help us be in the same room as we're going to continue parenting our children for the rest of their lives and our lives together? And we want to do that in a loving way. So how can we bring that love back? And not only was it the piece around, I'm no longer a victim, I get to respond in a way that I want to this, but I also started to see him not as a villain. He was not a villain. He wasn't a bad person. As many people kept telling me, he's bad, he's bad. I was like, no, he's not. He may have done a bad thing, but that doesn't make him bad, and it doesn't make him a villain at all. He's just a man. And we get to decide whether we want to let this make us or break us. And we chose to let it make us, and use the opportunity to really bring a mirror onto both of us to be better people, both better partners for each other, better parents. And we recognized that we were better together than we were apart. So then it became about, how do we heal and how do we forgive? And we do that with love, and we do that with intention. And it became more about that piece than it was about blame, resentment, revenge. It became more about love, connection, recreating a more beautiful life. There was a beautiful quote that a friend did send me, actually, which was very helpful. And she sent me, and you've probably heard of it, Kate, kintsugi. It's the Japanese art of mending broken pottery. And I remember just thinking, my heart is broken, my life is broken, everything is broken. And that's when she sent me, this card. I've been writing a blog at the time. And it was, we got to, even though our life was in shatters, we could either leave it broken or we could piece it back together with gold and make it better than it ever was and even more beautiful. And it was those messages that helped me have the hope to believe that it was possible. We could mend this, we could heal this with gold and make it even more beautiful than it was before. And it has.
Not everyone's going to be in that position where they can reconstruct the relationship. But I think what was so lovely about what you were saying just then is that even if you're not putting it back together with the gold, even if you are leaving that relationship in pieces, to go through that process where there's been infidelity and to abandon those labels of victim and villain feels incredibly powerful, irrespective of whether you can reconstruct the relationship. But that letting go of those roles and those labels feels like it's absolutely tantamount to being able to, as you say, create a loving co-parenting relationship, to be fit for purpose as parents and as human beings. How do you do that part of it? So let's say you're not necessarily, because you coach people now, and I guess you don't coach people just to reconnect with their partners. You're coaching people to be able to move on with love. How do you move on with love in those circumstances where betrayal has played such a part?
I know that most people aren't going to want to hear this, but time plays a huge factor. I think we can all be living in a society where we want to rush on and move on. And I work with clients at the moment. They're just like, I just want to be 12 months on in this for all to feel better. And I want the relief and I want to feel good. But it's also in the recognition that in time plays such a huge healing factor through it all. And I think there's, levels of scales that you move through. And I think one of the biggest things that I have learned through all of it is that you have to grieve. I think it's so important, and maybe it was no coincidence looking back that my mum died 6 months before all of this happened, because it was a way for me to learn how to grieve and to grieve fully. And, it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to cry. And it's okay to look at all of your emotions. And I'd retrained as a mindfulness coach at the time. So it was really about bringing what I've coined my big 5 calm concepts into everything. And the first one was all about just bring awareness to how you're feeling and not making it right or wrong. It's just like name the feeling, own the feeling, allow yourself to be sad, allow yourself to be angry, allow yourself to be happy. Even if you're happy and you feel guilty for being happy, just allow yourself to be happy. Allow yourself to feel all of those feelings and not make it mean anything bad about you. There's no good or bad feelings. It's just a whole range of human emotions. So bring that first level of awareness to feeling it and bring a level of acceptance to the situation that you're in. I remember one of the questions that I kept trying to go over and over and over in my head is that I just don't understand. How am I ever going to understand? How could he do this? How can I move forward? How can this? And I know it's a question that many of my clients come and say, I just don't understand. It's like, you can't understand. And you're going to kind of almost drive yourself mad trying to understand the understandable, because it's not something that you did or you would do. So you've just got to accept that it's that. And once you've moved into that acceptance place, then you can start to really move through to the next. And which I always think is this, we've talked about, I've shared forgiveness, is about this bringing forgiveness and compassion, I believe, go hand in hand. And this is where the love piece comes in. The compassion is love. It's just like show compassion and understanding. And I think this is when I really started to really coin that phrase of he's not a villain. He's not a bad person. He just did something that's upsetting. He did something that was so against himself. How can I bring compassion to his behaviors? How can I bring compassion to mine? And how can I bring that level of forgiveness? Because, forgiveness is the antidote to a lot of pain. So then just moving on to this, once you've got this level of acceptance for what is, and you bring yourself into this present moment, that's when you can start to bring in the compassion and the forgiveness. Compassion is a lot around non-judgment. It's about as I was saying, it's about the recognition of no one's a villain in this story. We may have done something wrong, but we're all human and we're here. We're going to make mistakes and we're going to make errors. And it's how can we forgive ourselves as much as we can forgive others? And the forgiveness for me was never really ever about forgiving or condoning the actions, but it was more about just the forgiveness for me, the forgiveness for him, because then it can stop the pain and stop the reliving. And how can you bring that compassion, which ultimately is love, love and respect back into it. And one of the biggest things that I then worked on was, how can I then bring trust back? I had to work on the trust.
Big one.
Yeah, massive, because I'd lost trust in myself. I'd lost trust in myself because I think maybe on some level I knew that there was something going wrong, but I just ignored my instincts.
Yes, a lot of people say that, don't they? The outward display is a trust in your partner, isn't it? If there's been infidelity, but it is that trust in yourself. How did I not see it coming, or how was I not able to voice it if I did have a suspicion? It's usually one of those two things, isn't it? Do you have to learn to trust yourself first before you can then go back and trust a partner, do you think?
I think everything always comes back to the self in all of it. How can I forgive myself? How can I trust myself? How can I love myself? How can I be more compassionate to myself? I think it all comes back to the self, because when you can learn to do that for yourself, you can learn how to do it for others.
Yeah, it's that whole put your own oxygen mask on first, isn't it? It's that same analogy where if you want to repair a relationship, you first got to repair yourself. Maybe that's sometimes where we go wrong because we rush off to couples counselors, don't we? We try and do all of the work together. And maybe the point you're making is actually there's some self work that has to be done before you can do that.
I strongly believe in that. And I think maybe one of the reasons why we are where we are today in an even more beautiful, more loving, more respectful, more honest, more transparent relationship is because we both worked on ourselves individually as well as did the work as ourselves as a couple. I had my own therapy and counseling and did the work on myself to do my healing, to be retrospective on everything that I had done. And so did he. And then we worked on our relationship together.
It sounds so obvious, doesn't it, when you say it? But it's just not how this kind of world works usually, is it? Normally we're talking about couples therapy and doing everything together and because that's what's broken. And actually what you're saying is that getting yourself to be a good component part before you try and put it together with something else, whether that's the same person or indeed whether it's you move on and it's a new person. It's so fundamental.
I think in any relationship, it's so important to know yourself, love yourself, and respect yourself first, because ultimately, then that shows everybody else who's with you how to love and respect yourself. Whereas if you don't respect yourself, if you don't love yourself, then how can you ask that of anybody else?
And when you were talking about repairing the relationship, you mentioned 5 C's, was it? And just talk us through the other C's involved in repairing relationships. If people are listening to this and they're either, going through a divorce or separation, but they want to repair themselves, or they're going through a bad patch and are wondering whether it's over and whether or not there's any hope to repair it. What's the model that you find most useful for talking about repairing relationships?
So it's the big 5 calm concepts. So it's not necessarily C's, but the big 5 calm. And the calm stands for living with a consciously aware and loving mind. So it's just really all of the principles that I've condensed down into these 5 principles to live with that loving mind. So if we go back to the love, it was like, how can I see my life through love? How can I see through my lenses through love? And even when we're talking about coming back together, whether you mend it with gold together or you mend it with gold into 2 separate new pieces, that's okay. So the first big 5 calm concept is really about the level of awareness, the awareness of how you're feeling, the awareness of your thoughts, the awareness of your behaviors. How is all of that shaping your reality? And just being very, very aware, almost just being a witness is the Eckhart Tolle. If you've ever read any of his books about the power of now, it's really bringing that principle into that deep centered awareness of self, the witnessing of self. The second big 5 is all around the acceptance piece. And I think, once again, this is very much building on Eckhart's work of just, we've got to accept what is. I cannot change the past. I work a lot with my clients about that. I wish I could just go back. It's like, you cannot go back. You are never, ever going to be able to go back, and you're going to drive yourself mad. And I've been there. I know that because I sat there for ages trying, if only I knew, if only I'd said something earlier, if only. You can't. You'll drive yourself mad. So it's just the acceptance of what is, and we are here where we are. And then the acceptance that you cannot change the future. You cannot predict the future. The only thing that you can control really is just the acceptance of letting go of control, and that the only thing you can control is the way that you are responding, the way that you're feeling in this moment right now. And that is how you start to change your future from this moment. The person you are being, the identity of yourself, the attitude you have, the beliefs that you have, how you hold yourself with grace and with dignity rather than seeking revenge and hatred. It's like this moment is what's going to dictate my future. So the acceptance of the current moment, acceptance of the past, and the acceptance that you cannot influence the future or predict the future. The third piece then is the big concept number 3 is bringing that level of compassion into everything that you do. The compassion and the non-judgment. You talked about, friends and family and their judgments and how they influence, but it's also not only the outside influences that you have, but it's also the compassion and the non-judgment you have on yourself, the compassion and non-judgment that you can have of your partner, and just really bring the understanding to all of it. I talk about it often like a hot potato. It's just like, if someone has a hot potato, it's really hot, and what they want to do is they want to throw it at someone. So can you just give them the compassion that they may have thrown that at you because they didn't want to hold it? It was a feeling that they didn't want to hold. So can you just hold it and put it down and have an open and honest conversation? I think that's really important. Forgiveness is key to the healing. Forgiveness to me it's not to condone, as I've said before, but it's just, there's some beautiful words by Wayne Dyer, who talks very much about, the snake bite is the painful bit, but the poison is
the bit
the
that
thing
kills
that kills
you.
you.
Yeah.
And it's that the forgiveness is the antidote to that. So the suffering. So while it's painful, that you don't have to let the suffering kill you. Forgiveness is that antidote to stop that poison flooding through your veins and making you so twisted and hateful and bitter. It's just like, I'm not forgiving to condone anything, but I'm choosing to forgive so that I free myself from the pain and the poison and the hatred, that I'm not a hateful, revengeful person. So all of those feelings that I started to feel felt so alien in my body. But again, we go back to that awareness and that acceptance, and it's okay. And I'm just a human. So can I forgive myself for the hatred and the anger? And how can I put it down so that I can go back to healing with compassion?
Well, forgiveness is a concept I always find quite tricky. It's such a hard one to navigate. But when you say it in those terms and you talk about forgiveness being a way to release yourself from that, it seems easier for me to grasp just listening to you. I don't know whether everybody else will feel the same, but it just is such a nebulous concept, that whole forgiveness thing, because it does come with undertones of, are you saying it doesn't matter anymore, or are you condoning it, or that you've somehow grown into a bigger, better person, and that makes me feel slightly uncomfortable, because I don't think necessarily we do learn from mistakes or do grow into bigger, better people with every event that happens. We change, and it's whether you want that change to be a positive change, whether you want it to manifest positively, or whether you want it to, impact you and keep that impact going, like you say, the poison circulating around your system and eventually killing you. And I guess it has quite physical overtones as well, doesn't it? Holding on to some of that stuff. If you hold it in your body, you become ill ultimately.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much science now to say that if you store those heavier emotions in your body, it can lead to disease within your body. So for me, the work that I did around the forgiveness, and I was doing a lot of, my own, curiosity, following curiosity and doing exactly this. It was like, how do I forgive? What do I forgive? How do I do this? And it was really that forgiveness is a pure act of self-love. We've talked about putting the oxygen mask on. It was just like, I've got to forgive myself in order to liberate myself. And in the liberating of it from myself, and then also forgiving everybody else as well, I liberated myself even more, because it was liberating me from my own mental trappings and trauma by constantly trying to understand or find revenge or seek revenge. It was like, that is not going to serve my future. I have this blank sheet of paper in front of me. Do I want to fill it with hatred and revenge and horrible things? Or do I actually just want to say, do you know what? This goes back to I am not a victim. Is just something that I find myself in, and I get to write my future. I just started to really go back to, again, very much this act of self. What do I want? I've got a clean slate. Once upon a time, we had all of these plans and all of these dreams, and it was very much wrapped in the two of us. And it was like, I don't know, but if I was to start again, what do I really want to focus on? What do I love? What brings me joy? Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? And I wrote a clean slate with just me. And it was like, and I'm going that way, and I'm choosing to see everything through this lens of love, and I'm choosing everything to be all about me. And I wrote my own definition from that point, that success from me from that point was about being with people that I love, doing things that I love, and loving myself in the process, i.e. not hating myself for being, I don't know, gullible or hating anything that I did. So everything became through this lens of love. And I asked myself, do I love this person? Do they make me feel good? Do I want to do this? Does this make me feel good? And really allowing myself. And I remember hearing someone talk about true love and understanding true love, and almost like that instant, coup de foudre, when you fall in love in an instant. And it's not that you fall in love with them. It's that you fall in love with yourself. That's the falling love. I'm a better person when I'm with you. I like me when I'm with you. And it was that I really wanted to latch onto. So I've got to know and understand myself and work out what I love. And then I will let other people come in who I know will help support me with that. And it just so happened that as we were going through this process through counseling to understand, can we be better parents? Can we be better people? Actually, together, us as better people are a really great team together. So shall we continue? Yes, let's do it.
It makes so much sense, doesn't it? Because you're not asking yourself to reconnect to something that has been bad. And in that, I mean that the relationship has been bad because it's become unhinged, or it's become distracted. You're not asking yourself to reconnect with that. You're saying, we are both working on ourselves. We're both making those component parts better. So then we have a new choice to make of, shall we reconnect? And if only one of you does the work, it's sort of like you almost can't get back together, can you? Because it takes both of you to do the work, to be willing to engage in it, and to then present a new choice of two enhanced, better understood people to then make a choice about whether or not you want to come back together again. It's fascinating. I'm conscious of time, and I know we talked at the very beginning about this sense of joy. And I just wanted to make the point that it sounds to me like you can find the joy whether you continue as a couple or whether you continue on your own path. What does finding joy look like? It sounds like you've got to do some individual work. It sounds like if you're holding on to the bitter old stuff and what's happened, there perhaps isn't the room or the headspace to explore joy. So how do you go about finding joy? What are the sort of component parts of setting out on that journey? Give us a taster. And then if people are kind of really interested, that I will point them to your website, they can come and have a look and perhaps engage you in helping them find that path.
So that was the question that I asked myself. So all of this had just happened. My mum had previously died, and I was lying on my bed thinking, will I ever be happy again? Will I ever find joy again? I just want to be happy, and I'd lost so much. I'd left my corporate job. I'd lost my identity. I'd been diagnosed with PTSD, clinical depression, insomnia, eating disorders. I was just at this really, really dark rock bottom place. I just wanted to find happiness again. So the first thing that I decided was, okay, I need to understand what happiness and joy means to me. And again, back to the self, to me, not to me and my husband, not to me and my family. What is joy for me? What is happiness for me? And I coined the joy list, and I wrote down about 8 things that I felt that brought me joy. So while I was in this really, really dark space, it was like, what do I love doing? Well, I love running. I love writing. I love reading. I love meditating. I love holding my children. I love walking the dog. I love being out in nature. All of these little things I love to do. So that brings me joy. So I set myself a challenge in this really, really dark space. I said, if I can do one thing a day off my joy list, one thing, then I will be able to cultivate joy again. So every day I would get up and I would look at my little piece of paper, and I've still got it. It's a piece of red scrappy paper that I put by my mirror. And every day I chose one thing. And I look back now and I look at the science behind it. And what I did was I was giving myself a daily dose of happiness every single day that compounded over time. And why I say it's dose, DOSE, is that I was giving myself an injection of happy hormones, because happy hormones are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And all of those things that I wrote down on my list match to one of those happiness hormone boosting. So whether it was dopamine, the reward, yes, I've done one thing off my list today. Oxytocin, I've cuddled the pets, cuddled the animals, flooded myself with that love and bonding hormone. Serotonin, I've been meditating, I've been out in in nature, fulfilling that good mood factor, and the endorphins, the eating of dark chocolate. I love chocolate, meditating again. All of those things gave me that daily dose that compounded over time. The more I did them, and I flooded my body with joy and hormones. So it started from an inside out with this chemical inside of me. And the more I did it, the more I wanted to do more and the more it compounded. So ultimately, that's how I got myself out of the darkness, by giving myself that. And then I healed myself back to happiness. And in doing so, along that journey, we healed our marriage, we healed our lives. And, we're now 8 years on, and it just couldn't be better.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Because it sounds such a nebulous concept, and then you break it down into a list. And who doesn't love a list? It can't just be me. But you break it down into a list, and as you say, there's science behind it. You do something very small, you take a very small step, and you are immediately building on something and amplifying some of that stuff that is ultimately going to transform you into a different place. But it sounds like it was hard work. I know, I'm sure it wasn't easy, but it feels like just taking that first step is the important thing.
I believe that you've got to walk this path to joy in love. As I said, love everything that you're doing, bring yourself back to the love, return to love. You've got to do it in truth. And the truth is always about your self-truth. It's about coming in deep within yourself and asking you what's true, and then having that courage to take those first small steps and just doing those little things. And when we all live such busy lives, it's about just saying, what's the one thing I can do for myself today that's going to help me return to love, help me return to joy, and allowing yourself to do that and allowing yourself to forgive.
That sounds like a great final tip to end on. So is there anything else, if you were going to say, if there's people listening, they're in that deep, dark, awful place that you've described so eloquently today, if they're there and they want to take that first step out, what's the one thing you would say to somebody listening who's in that place right now?
Reach out for help. I think I was very lucky in the fact that I had the support of some very dear and close friends who loved me for me no matter what, and whatever choice. They made it very clear, whatever you choose to decide, we'll support you. Professional help. As I said, James and I were very lucky. We both had individual support and help, and we worked together with therapy, and that was priceless. Yes, it's expensive, it's not cheap, but it was priceless in the sense that it brought us back together and has given us an even better life. So I would definitely say look for support. And I would say believe in hope. Hope is the conduit for miracles. And I would say that if anyone had asked me, in the moments when I found out about what had been happening, I would have said, it will take a miracle for me to forgive and to fall in love with the same man again. But because I chose love, because I chose that, we created a miracle. So hope is the conduit for miracles. And I hope what I've been able to do today is give some hope to some of your listeners who want to make a different choice, to be able to come back together and be the hope and the inspiration for them to make the right choice for them.
Exactly. No, I definitely think you have done that. And thank you, Ali, for such a moving and honest appraisal of what's happened to you. It's all we've got time for today, but where can people, if they've been inspired by this or want to find out more or reach out, where can people find more information about you?
Of course. So I love to hang out on all the social media platforms, my favorite being Instagram. You can find me there. I'm just XO Ali Mortimer. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes. You can come and find me on my website, which is just www.xoalimortimer.com. You'll find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, all of the places, and you can find me there and find my contact details. And I would love to help whoever needs that extra dose of happiness, that extra dose of joy to get them out of a really dark, difficult situation, because there is hope and there is light at the end of the tunnel.
And if you're further down the track and you are separating or divorcing, or you need some co-parenting support and advice, you can visit us at amicable.co.uk, where you can explore all of our free resources or book a free advice consultation too. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can hear about new podcast episodes by subscribing for updates and visiting thedivorcepodcast.com, or on your favourite listening platform. Please like and subscribe to the podcast, and please keep sharing and telling your friends and family all about it. Thank you so much, Ali, for joining us, and thank you, everybody, for listening.